Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
He's got cancer, releasing hostages, ICE raids, government shutdown, the economy. We're just getting started on Liberty RoundTable Live. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Our goal to promote God, family, country, to protect life, liberty, and property, and to do so on every device you have at your fingertips. Dr. Scott Bradley, freedomsrisingsun.com, well known for his Q&As on the Constitution every week. Join the good doctor on Thursdays, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, for the incredible weekly webinars. If you can't make it, though, you can check him out on BitChute, Rumble, just about everywhere else. Look for Freedom's Call, but you got to get a little invite so you can join. Go to freedomsrisingsun.com for that invite. Dr. Bradley, welcome back.
Well, thank you, and it's another beginning of another week, if you can believe that. I mean, the weeks are flying by. I don't know, what is there, only about 75, 80 days left in the year. I mean, seems like Christmas was just here. It's back again.
Well, Merry Christmas, Dr. Bradley.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy
Well, that's the thing.
Don't want to skip that either.
No, I see in some of the stores, I go in there, they got their Halloween stuff up, their Thanksgiving stuff up, their Christmas stuff up. I mean, it's a marketing.
Wait a minute. I thought it was Columbus Day, buddy.
It is Columbus Day, but I don't know what they put up.
We can't skip Columbus Day. That was a critical reality check, as well as people are willing to go search the earth in favor of a religious-free opportunity and this kind of stuff. And we can't forget that.
No, I don't believe Columbus was looking for religious freedom, but there's sure a bunch of people that followed on that thought it was a nice opportunity to get away from the oppression of religion that seemed to fill the old world. And it truly was. I've got about a 5-hour presentation. It takes me several times to do it, though. I don't do it all at once. Most people can't do that. But I do a 5-hour presentation on religious liberty. And what brought about the vast majority of the early migration to the North American continent. And it was an amazing thing. I mean, it started basically at the meridian of time after the death of the Savior and the oppressive efforts to stop people from worshiping, and it just went forward and metastasized and steamrolled, and people just got sick and tired of it. You're right. People wanted religious freedom. Again, I don't think Columbus was looking for that particularly. He was looking for fame and fortune, but it opened some doors, even though I believe the Vikings were in North America centuries before, had some, shall we say, some long-term settlements that they did too. So yeah, but the whole thing is kind of, it all fits together, I mean,
no doubt this continent, after the days of Pele, critical, and people fled to it many, many times for liberty. Some had fortunes in their hearts. Some had liberty in their hearts. Some had fame, but they went through a lot and they suffered. And I choose to think God guides people here. And I think we need to be very careful about that. Am I endorsing the illegal activity of immigration? No, I'm not. But I am saying I think oftentimes the Lord leads people here for religious liberty. There's no doubt about that, right?
Yeah, the idea of limited government, checks and balances, God-given rights, all of those kinds of things have certainly got to be in the formula. If you came here to eat the goodie box, that's the freebies that are out there, well, you're just there to steal from your fellow man is really what you're all there to do. But there were a lot of people that came here with goodness and seeking good things in their hearts. They didn't get it right, really, from the beginning. I mean, and the Pilgrims and Puritans got here. They brought some of their acrimony, religious acrimony, with them, and the Catholics and the Baptists and that were persecuting each other, and the Quakers that had problems, and the Anglican Church, and in fact, even when the Bill of Rights started and came into effect under the Constitution, there were 7 states that had state religions. I mean, state-supported, the states did, not the national government. And, the founding fathers weren't too panicked about it. They'd get it right sooner or later, and they did. And Thomas Jefferson had a big hand in that, of course, with his Religious Liberties Act in Virginia.
Well, and it just goes to show how hard it really is for people to throw off what they know, what they believe, what they've understood, what they've been taught from the cradle, what they, the society they lived in. The idea is if you were to give a communist Chinese person freedom tomorrow, they'd throw it away. Not because they mean to, but because they don't know how to preserve it. They don't know how to live another way. And I think, we see that with Moses and Israel. We see that with, our lives. We are offered a better way oftentimes, but do we embrace it? Oftentimes we're slow to remember our God, and we're slow to remember the ways of liberty and freedom as well. And so it's very tough. Ezra Taft Benson, former Secretary of Agriculture, highlighted this idea. He said, sometimes you got to unlearn what you learned in college so you can actually learn. And so there's a lot of commentary about this, that it's very tough for peoples. I don't think people mean to be evil or bad in many ways. I think they just stick with what they know, and it's very hard to unlearn and change our ways. I think we're all guilty of that to a great degree, right?
Well, I call it the tradition of our fathers.
For sure.
We get some false traditions passed down to us, and we've embraced them, as you say, from cradle to grave many times. It goes generationally. And, I'll just give you an example internationally. There was a big tussle going on over in China in the 1930s between a guy called Chiang Kai-shek and another guy called Mao Zedong. And the guy that was more inclined to liberty was an ally of the United States during World War II, saved probably 1 million American lives by keeping the Japanese occupied in China during that time. Chiang Kai-shek, he was a warlord, and he didn't have that great tradition of liberty and proper government that the American founding fathers brought forth. But he was more inclined to liberty than Mao. And Mao was a communist right from the beginning. The Americans knew that. It was a lie that he was just an agrarian reformer and everything like that. But Chiang Kai-shek, as much as he helped us in saving American lives in World War II, his tradition of being a warlord was still pretty brutal. And so, things it takes time sometimes for the goodness and mercy and all those wonderful things to settle out right. I heard a thing the other day, and I may poorly phrase it here, and I may be shifting gears too, but let me, there's justice, where you get what you deserve. There's mercy, where you get less than you deserve in terms of how bad things are. And then there's grace, and that's where you get your entire challenge paid for by the Savior. Okay. So we look for grace, and we're trying to go through and go forward with a faith in our Savior and what he's done. And none of us, sometimes we don't like justice because it's pretty harsh. We'd like mercy, but sometimes that's pretty tough to face too. And ultimately and finally, the Savior provided grace so that we could come and have the full, somebody else paid the price. It was him. And so, I think we do take steps in the way we kind of progress sometimes. And I'm hoping for grace. I certainly need it. And I think all of us do if we were honest with ourselves.
Amen to that, ladies and gentlemen. Look, we need to commemorate Columbus Day. We need to realize there was a lot of value of him coming here. We need to commemorate courage, if you will. Columbus Day should respect historical achievements, despite the controversial legacy of violence and racism. There's a lot of claims that there's violence and racism and everything that what he did. And I think there's some truth to a lot of that, whether he was guilty of it or whether, misunderstanding. It's hard to look back at the violence or the bad acting of certain people and determine where their hearts really were, Doctor.
It's true. And there's, let's just put it this way. I used to be an ardent defender of everything that Columbus did. But as my research there's been a lot of bad things of what he did. I don't know if much of it was intentional. Some of it may have been, and it's hard to look through the lens, our modern lens of, how we look at things and fully, judge properly. And I know the Savior will ultimately judge it properly, but
thank
there
heavens
were some
for
tough
that,
things.
I might add.
Yeah, I mean, there were some tough things: disease, there was slavery, there was, terrible tyranny that came as a result
Hunger,
of
pain.
But you know
all
what? The
kinds
stuff,
of,
the stuff that was here in America, you look at the horrific stuff, the human sacrifice, tens and tens of thousands that went on through Mayan and Inca stuff. I mean, it wasn't like it was everything was a hunky-dory.
Hang tight, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Bradley, yours truly, continuing seconds on the one and only Liberty Roundtable live on Columbus Day, baby.
To leave a message, press 1. To change your message, press 7.
Hey, Mom, Dad, Mark here. Wow, I love college, really. I never knew living on my own could be so, good for me.
To change your message, press 7.
So, here I am at college. It's cool. Well, of course, it's only been a week.
To change your message.
Hey, it's me. I was just remembering that time I hit my first home run, through the garage window. Thanks for not being mad. No.
To change.
Hi. Boy, I miss you guys. I miss my room. I miss waking up to warm socks straight from the dryer. Warm socks.
Family. Isn't it about time?
Hi, it's Mark. Love you guys. I'll call you later.
From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Introducing Managed IT Services from NPI. We offer top-notch data backup and recovery, email spam protection, and network security tailored to your needs and budget. With 20-plus years of experience in the medical field, our HIPAA-certified consultants know what it takes to protect sensitive information. Don't settle for less. Give us a call at 801-706-6980 and experience the difference with Managed IT Services. Remember, your IT support should be fast, efficient, and reliable.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
That's the sad thing in America. We're divided on so many different fault lines. It's not even funny, my fellow Americans. Listen, I want to commemorate courage. You know what? The debate is, A, how religious was Christopher? Was Christopher white? Oh, Christopher was a racist. Christopher was violent. This and that. And we can drag everything through the mud in history if we want to have a negative lens. I choose to have a positive lens and say this: I'm commemorating courage on this day. What a courageous man to go from, government to government in his day and get the funding and get the, things in place that he needed to take a bold step and come to the new world. And wow. So I want to celebrate Columbus Day by respecting historical achievements. Okay. Let's respect historical achievements. Let's let go of the controversial legacy of violence and racism and everything else and say, you know what? We can't put ourselves in their shoes. We don't know if it was hunger that drove that, if it was hatred, if it was anger, if it was fear, if it was self-defense. We don't have all the facts on that kind of stuff, people. So let's not just destroy, the legacy here. You say, well, Indigenous People Day, Sam, we're celebrating that too. What about that? I want to celebrate goodness, morality, right, God, family, country. And I want to reject the naysayers. I get that sometimes it's appropriate to call a spade, but I also get oftentimes when we do that, if we're not careful, we undermine the very positivity that we could embrace. And it's sometimes sad when we do that, we seem to ignore all the good in the world and focus on the bad. If it bleeds, it leads is the news mantra, right? I want to reject that and say, you know what? Can I pull the good out of even bad circumstances? I hope so. Can I look at the bright side of look, a lot of people coming to America, it was bad for them. Take the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to make the poignant point. They were abused more than anybody, more than the blacks, more than the Native Americans, more than anybody. They were literally facing an extermination order by a governor, Governor Boggs in Missouri. They literally were forced out by bayonet and barrel, folks. Shoot women and children and on sight. While they were fleeing to safety in the snow and ice, the government called upon them to serve their country. I mean, does it get worse than that? I don't think so. But I'm not here to down the government. I'm here to say it was a horrible mistake in history, without a doubt. But because of religious liberty, because of what America offers, because of the Constitution, because of the checks and balances, we can worship today freely. It wasn't always so, and that's a sad, point in history. But the question becomes, what do we focus on? And I think we need to focus on the good, even if circumstances weren't great for somebody to be here or great for the reasons that many of the Mormons, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, are in the Rocky Mountains. And hey, that's a horrible story. I mean, they should be in Missouri if it wasn't for persecution and abuse. But I can either focus on that abuse, or I can focus on the wonderful legacy that America has provided for more people in the history of the world than any other country. We've had more freedom, more prosperity, more safety, more godliness, for everyone, despite any smudges you can find. But let's not magnify the smudges and betray the truth. We need to celebrate and commemorate courage, Doctor.
Well, absolutely right. And it's absolutely, it's interesting to me that, if we build upon the good that's there, if we stand upon the shoulders of those that went before and bring about more goodness, there's a whole chain of events that happen that sometimes we can't see the end from the beginning. Now, we're not God, and we have a very narrow understanding. And sometimes we judge harshly, but it's interesting to see how, if we're building over the long term for goodness, it occurs to me, and I don't know how long you wanted to spend on Columbus Day, but 1492 was an interesting watershed, if you will, in Europe. There was, prior to that, you'd had a huge kind of devouring of the European life and culture by the Muslim influx.
A destroying of.
And there was a changing that happened in 1492. The Spanish royalty were able to then act differently than they would have perhaps under the Muslim influence. And excuse me, the Christian royalty then sent Columbus forward, and he did what he did. But there were inquisitions that happened after that. There were horrid inquisitions against Jewish people, against Christian people that believed differently than the Catholic Church. I mean, there was a whole bunch of things, but the long chain of events ultimately and finally led to the settlement of North America by a people that wanted to worship according to the dictates of their conscience. And we
and
should
I'm
not
one of
let
them
that.
today, Doctor.
Do you what?
I'm one of them today.
One what?
The one to worship, free to my own conscience, and do what I want to do and be free.
Well, certainly, and we would say to all people, worship how you would, but let's not destroy everybody else's liberty because you make religious error. And Jefferson talked about that. If there were things like honor killings and stuff that a religion believed in, he believed those should not be protected under the United States religious liberty, the First Amendment stuff. If religious liberty could not be interpreted in a way that destroyed the individual God-given rights that all of these individuals were so, fervently focused on. So there's a balance, but it takes understanding. And you just can't willy-nilly expect, you say, oh, well, they believe in honor killings. I guess that's okay because it's their religious belief. No, it's religious error. And correct government would stop that. And
just so you know, there's the difference between legal and law. Same-sex marriage may be legal, but it's against God's law, which is law. And I bring that up because there's a difference between religious error that just lets somebody have a viewpoint that's out in the weeds. We're okay with that. You can have religious error and believe what you want to believe, whether it's factual or not. It's when you cross the line and violate the 10 Commandments that, in my opinion, religious error becomes a big problem. So, because then you violate law. So when religious error crosses violating the law, meaning God's law, then there's a big difference versus, hey, I believe this way, you believe that way, right?
Well, it's interesting that Blackstone covered this in his first volume. Originally, his commentaries were in 4 volumes, and nowadays you see them in 1 volume or 2, but the original was in 4 volumes. I recommend getting that and reading it in its original format because it's so fascinating, the old style of writing. But at any rate, one of the things that he wrote about was the origins of law and how God and us as his children predated mortal experience, and that the origins of proper law begin with God. And he talks about how if God decreed and God declared something, it became throughout all nations. It would be the law to all nations. And he uses as the example murder, about how the laws of nature and nature's God all forbid it, and that justifies mankind's law against murder. And so he goes through a really interesting, the first volume is very fascinating, where he talks about the rights of free men and everything, but he starts right in the very beginning, before even the earth was formed, you might say. And he says, the origin of all just law is God, and we're justified in obeying that. And in fact, we're required to do so. And he goes through that analysis and talks about how mankind's laws could be justified by founding them on God's laws. And he talks about the God of nature and nature's God. All of these things, they weren't some volcano they were going to sacrifice a virgin into or something like that. It is the God of heaven. And he really ties it all together in a very succinct manner. It doesn't take very long to review it, but we get so far afield sometimes with our laws today, and so-called laws. You talk about laws and legal and all that kind of stuff. He ties everything back that is just to God. And he says God gave us an understanding, an intelligence that we could use to come to understand these things and embrace them. And a lot of times we've set that aside in our modern society. We, like you say, same-sex marriage, it violates the very foundation of God's law. And they've figured out a way to twist it to a point that suddenly everybody's saying, and now furries or fuzzies or whatever the heck these things are called. Now people are saying there's 89 or whatever there are different genders, and oh my heavens. And it's like, no, this is pretty straightforward if you're willing to, use your intelligence and come to the baseline of this thing.
How many genders are there, ladies and gentlemen? The answer is 2. Dos, male and female, created to them, and science backs that reality. And to really consider anything else is just pure, absolute poppycock. It's complete folly, and we need to get away from this idea. Most of the world is mocking us for this, by the way. They're just like, are you kidding me right now? Especially Russia. Now, I know Russia doesn't, play well in America today right now, but I'm just telling you, at least they know there's male and female. And we need to take a page out of God's playbook on this. And we really need to realize, in my opinion, that God sets the rules, not us. And so truth and law is based on God. And you can say, well, Sam, we don't believe as you do. That's fine. Doesn't change the truth. The truth remains, whether I agree with it or not. Imagine that, even if Sam doesn't agree. God's in charge, not Sam. I know that sounds crazy when it comes to you and your beliefs. But look, we all need to work on making our beliefs square with God's belief. And there's room for religious differences and religious error. But when it comes to violating God's law and violating the 10 Commandments, that's when we got to sit up and take notice and say, hey, we can't legislate morality, but we certainly can make sure the proper role of limited constitutional government backs God's law. When we do, blessings are so great, there's not room enough to receive them. What a blessing that is, huh? Hang tight, more in seconds. Dr. Scott Bradley, freedomsrisingsun.com.
Protecting your liberties. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
Breaking news this hour from townhall.com. I'm Michael Harrington. The Keystone XL Pipeline might be revived. Here's White House correspondent Greg Clugston.
During talks at the White House this past week, Canadian Prime Minister Carney raised the prospect of reviving the Keystone XL Pipeline project with President Trump. That's according to a Canadian government official. The project was killed 4 years ago after Joe Biden canceled the permit. The pipeline was to transport crude from Western Canada to Nebraska. The Canadian official says Donald Trump was receptive to the idea. Greg Clugston, Washington.
It's back to work tomorrow for Wall Street, with many wondering whether the market's recent gains are a thing of the past.
A renewal of U.S.-China trade tensions dealt a body blow to the stock market on Friday. The Dow plunged almost 880 points for a loss of close to 2%. The Nasdaq fell 3.5%. The S&P tumbled more than 2.5%. China's newly announced restrictions on rare earth materials exports and President Trump's threat of 100% tariffs on Chinese imports in response to what he calls a hostile act sent the market into a tailspin. Rich Thomason, Washington.
Estonia has temporarily closed a road passing through Russian territory after reports of Russian soldiers standing in it. Estonia's public broadcaster reporting today that the closure followed border guards observing a larger than usual Russian unit standing in the road. The Estonian Border Agency says the closure of the Sastebut is necessary for safety. The area is a small part of Russia extending into Estonia. British police have arrested 2 men on suspicion of murder after former Lost Prophets singer Ian Watkins was stabbed to death in a northern English prison. Watkins was serving a 29-year sentence there for child sex offenses. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Hey, it's Mike Gallagher, host of The Mike Gallagher Show. I don't mess around when it comes to saving you money. Right now, rates have dropped to the lowest level in over a year and a half. That means if you bought your home or refinanced in the last 3 years, you could be saving hundreds of dollars every month. Lower your rate, lower your monthly payment, even kick that pesky PMI to the curb. And get this, you can skip 2 full months of mortgage payments. But that's not all. Fellowship Home Loans just rolled out something incredible. Their very own HELOC and lines of credit. Approval in just 5 minutes. Money in your account in as little as 4 days. It's the easiest system you've ever used. You can do it yourself online. Whether you want to pay off bills, tackle a home project, cover education, or even a wedding, Fellowship Home Loans makes it simple to leverage the money that's already sitting in your house. Just go to fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G, fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G, or call 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-6453. Fellowship Home Loans, mortgage lending guided by the book.
Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, DBA Fellowship Home Loans, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 819382.
Former Sheriff Richard Mack recounts in his book The Proper Role of Law Enforcement, how he came to realize while working as a beat cop how wrong the all-too-common orientation of police officers is when they think of their job as being to write tickets and arrest people. Richard Mack tells of his personal transformation from by-the-number cop to Constitution-conscious defender of citizen safety and freedoms. Learn what it really means to serve and protect. Purchase your copy at cspoa.org. That's cspoa.org.
Get ready to be part of something incredible. We're breaking barriers and delivering the powerful stories that mainstream media won't touch. Your support is what fuels our mission to revolutionize journalism and bring you the truth. Join our passionate community of changemakers by donating at libertynewsradio.com today. Together, we're creating the future of news.
Cybercrime is exploding. Take Sarah from Sweet Delights, whose world crumbled after having to close with not being able to bounce back. Small businesses are prime targets, but the right strategies can keep yours safe. Jay Hill, CEO of Network Providers, has co-authored The Cyber Playbook Simplifies Cybersecurity for Business Owners with Strategies to avoid costly breaches and fines. Build a strong cyber attack response. Secure your business with key protections. Cyber threats aren't slowing down, but you can stay ahead. Protect your business. Ensure its security for tomorrow. Get the Cyber Playbook today at networkprovidersinc.com/cyber-playbook or call 385-446-5500 now.
Commemorating courage, ladies and gentlemen. Columbus Day respects historical achievements despite controversial legacies or whatever you want to call it, violence, racism, any allegations put forth. Can we just celebrate America's achievements, folks? Even for the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. If you ask the average Mormon if they're grateful for the United States and grateful for the Constitution and grateful for freedoms and religious liberty, and they will tell you yes. They were abused more than anybody in American culture. I don't care who you point at. The Mormons had it worse. And they're not looking for reparations. They're not begging for, they're not focusing on the negativity. And I think that's a powerful example of solutions and saying, hey, let's commemorate courage. Columbus Day respects these historical achievements. Think about what the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints did. They came to the defense of their country in the Mexican War, left their wives and children because the government asked them to, and stood tall for liberty, even though they were abused more than anyone else. That's commemorating courage, folks. That's learning to stand your ground. What a tremendous reality that is. Now, we've been talking about commemorating courage. We're talking about God. We're talking about religious liberty. We're talking about etc. This is an interesting story that came out after the Charlie Kirk assassination, and I never had time to get to it, but I want to mention it now because it's so relevant. Headline says this, in an article titled, "We Paid Some Etsy Witches to Curse Charlie Kirk." It was published 2 days before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Claire Given at Jezebel detailed her experience working with witches in an attempt to place a curse on Kirk and silence his message. I kid you not. You got a publication called Jezebel, and you got this lady who literally writes 2 days before Charlie's murder that she worked with witches, paid them to put a curse on Charlie. Of course, it's since been taken down, but can still be accessed through Internet archives, like the Wayback Machine and that kind of stuff, if you know what that is. Anyway, the Daily Caller, I'll get to the Daily Caller in a second. This witches thing is insanity, doctor. This is an example of your primary point. It's one thing to have a difference of opinion. It's another thing to literally pay someone to put a curse. Now, some of us may not believe in that curse. Some of us may believe in it. You can believe what you want to, but when you start to do things that start to interfere with another, my rights end where yours begin, doctor. This is an insane, I don't want to call it a coincidence. It's an insane response if you don't like Charlie Kirk's message. None of us are trying to put hits out on witches, even though we completely disagree with them. Do you want to speak to that, doctor?
Well, first of all, I would say that I don't put any stock in, I know you don't either, in this, I don't know, it's an absurd kind of approach to things. But it does show the level of acrimony that is often reflected against those that believe in, anything. I mean, religious liberty, let's just take that since we're talking about that right now. Freedom of speech, for example. And here last week we talked about how the House in the spring of 2024 passed an anti-Semitism bill that said that if you didn't go along with another big organization's definition of anti-Semitic speech, then you were in violation. And if the law had passed,
government and Benjamin Netanyahu and company.
I'm telling you.
I don't go along with them. I'm not a bigot, but I'm going to speak against what they're doing. What they're doing is evil.
Well, and that's the thing is that sometimes overzealous people and the whole House. Well, the House passed it in the spring. I think it was May of 2024. Where they passed this thing that violates the First Amendment, and it violates this idea that not only do we have religious freedom ourselves, but we have the freedom to speak against and to write against things that are constraining our religious liberties. And And so we get zealous. There are people today, you say, oh, the witches shouldn't have done this. Well, neither should the House of Representatives have done that.
I agree 100%. And let me give you the next one that shouldn't be done to illustrate your point. We stand against all these calls for violence. We stand against, all these abuses. I don't want any harm to come to these so-called, Etsy witches or whatever. Now, I wish they'd change their views. I don't think they're going down the right religious road, in my humble opinion. But as long as they don't commit any crimes, as long as they don't violate other people's freedoms, I don't like it, but I'm free to let them, do what they want to do. I will do everything that I can to make society put them in the fringes, because that's my belief. But I have every right to it. What I don't have the right to do is cross those lines. And we're talking about these lines, folks. But the next headline is this. The Daily Caller was founded by Tucker Carlson and by another guy. He's currently the editor at large, Jeffrey Ingersoll. And Jeffrey Ingersoll is advocating for violence in response to attacks on conservatives. The New York Times has the piece, and I'm not a fan of the New York Times, but I do keep an eye on the opposition news, so to speak. And his column, that's just Jeffrey Ingersoll guy, in his column titled, "Enough is Enough," he says this: "I choose violence. Ingersoll encourages patriots to use force, even if police are present, and suggests violent actions like," and I don't even know what this is, I guess clotheslining progressive activists who take a sign. So just clothesline them. Now, I kind of know what that is. I don't know how that relates in terms of taking a sign. I'm just not comfortable with any of this, and I reject all of this. Dylan Hausman, editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller, defended the column, interpreting these actions as, quote, self-defense, but not a call for political violence. The publication added in an editor's note, reinforcing this stance. Anyway, Tucker Carlson, Neil Patel, all these different people are involved because they founded the Daily Caller. But I look at this, and I like a lot of what the Daily Caller has to say. I believe in a lot of their news. They do a good job on the conservative news front. But in my humble opinion, Doctor, in this case, they're off their rock crazy. Why would they be ratcheting up right now? They should be de-escalating. They should be going, hold on. Let's follow the Prince of Peace. And the sad part is this shows, to a great degree, their true colors, in my view. Your thoughts, Doctor?
Well, the American Founding Fathers, and you can read the Declaration of Independence to get at least a brief overview of this, about the efforts that they went through to try and save the relationship between the colonies and royalty in England. They turned all stones, if you will. They made all the overtures that they possibly could. At some point, it did become necessary to shed blood. We're not at that point. But what's happening right now with the escalation process that we're finding on both sides of the aisle is that that they're falling into the ploy that has been worked so many times, so powerfully, and to the bad effect, where the communists have used an escalation point where they bring a fracture into society. It is a conflict-based kind of program where they basically do what they can to disrupt society, the rhythm of society, the long-held values. And you can read about this in the Declaration also. But the fact of the matter is that that they try to bring it to the point that it does break, and by breaking it, society unravels. And the attempt has always been, and again, it's been done quite successfully from the communist point of view, is that they then replace societal norms with their new order, if you will, the New World Order, that George Bush spoke so infamously about. But that's the kind of program that is being done, and whether you're so-called conservative, liberal, whether you're a left or right or whatever it is, what we need to do is start thinking about what is right and what is wrong, and let's try embracing that. And I think that right now with the acrimony, the escalation, it's just not on a good path. And we haven't done what the American founders did in the beginning. It turned all stones to try and preserve what was good about what their relationship was with England. And we're not at the point of bloodshed. And there are people that are always, it seems, it's fire ready aim in some of these people's minds.
And I would come back and agree with his title saying enough is enough, but I would come back and say enough is enough. It's time we bring God, family, and country back into the public square. It's time we truly follow the Prince of Peace, not just in precept, but when the going gets tough, that's the time to double down and de-escalate and stand with the Prince of Peace. Dr. Bradley and Sam Bushman in seconds.
Do you know what is great about America? Ask an Immigrant. Ask an Immigrant is a new podcast dedicated to helping Americans, especially our youth, value, appreciate, and be grateful for the freedoms we have here in America. Join host Lydia Wallace-Nuttall as she interviews immigrants from around the world to discover their inspiring personal stories about why they came to America. To learn more about why America is the most prosperous, greatest country in the world, download the Loving Liberty app or go to lovingliberty.net.
In the medical field, IT security is crucial. Our highly skilled consultants are HIPAA certified and have 20-plus years of experience servicing medical clinics, billing, and supply companies. We offer comprehensive endpoint protection, guarding your computers and servers against all stages of threats. And with our 24/7 monitoring services, you'll never worry about extensive downtime again. Ready to level up your IT support? Call 801-706-6980 today and discover how great IT services can be with managed IT services.
As you all know, Roe versus Wade has resulted in some of the most permissive abortion laws anywhere in the world. For example, in the United States, it's one of only 7 countries to allow elective late-term abortions, along with China, North Korea, and others. Right now, in a number of states, the laws allow a baby to be born from his or her mother's womb in the 9th month. It is wrong. It has to change. Americans are more and more pro-life. You see that all the time. In fact, only 12% of Americans support abortion on demand at any time. Under my administration, we will always defend the very first right in the Declaration of Independence, and that is the right to life.
All right, back with you live, ladies and gentlemen. This is cool news. It's relatively rare that I find the news story this good, but here it is. A book challenging the academic consensus of the existence of God. There's 2 French authors that are putting out the book. I don't even know if I'm saying this right. Mitchell E. Ballaret and Oliver Bonaces. I don't even know. Anyway, the book is titled God, the Science, the Evidence argues that modern scientific theories necessitate a creator God. It's a tremendous book. The book's set to be published in Britain in late October. Has already seen a notable success, they say. It's already sold over 400,000 copies in various languages. It was released by the French authors in 2021. So the book's been around, but it hasn't been in English. And now they're releasing it in English, which is pretty interesting to say the least. The English edition, they say, will have an additional run of 110,000 copies. And this one Ballaret person is a 79-year-old lifelong Catholic. Anyway, they acknowledge the coherence of the argument that there is a God, there has to be a God. Science now comes down to saying it's just the odds are so against that there's no God that it was a Big Bang theory without a, rudder and all that. They say it's absolute baloney. And the article really doubles down, highlighting this book, saying, hey, the fact is there's a God, and even modern science acknowledges that fact. That's unprecedented, Doctor.
Well, actually, it's just going around. I'm amazed. I mean, there was some good guys in France years and years, decades, centuries ago. I mean, like Lafayette and Bastiat. There's been some good, philosophical things. I mean, you look at Montesquieu. The French kind of have had a long dry spell. Let's put it that way. But it is something. The founding. I mean, during the Renaissance, there was a great recognition of order in the universe and how it required a creator. And the founding fathers saw in that this hand of God, if you will, in everything that happened. And there was a guy by the name of Denoy that wrote a book called Human Destiny, and it was probably my first book of substance that I read. I think I read it when I was about 9 years old. And it talks about what it sounds like that this book is about the odds of stuff happening. Denoy was a statistician, and he was a theologian also that was Catholic. And these guys sound like they are too. And maybe it's a revisiting of that. But the probability, the possibility, the impossibility of everything coming together as it is right now. I mean, he talks about even the possibility of a horse hoof, something as simple as a stump on the end of a leg to run on, that somehow was able to go through all of the vicissitudes of a horse's life. But you look at the development of eyesight, and I mean, smell and taste. I mean, these things that are part of the human experience. They're just so far beyond the realm of probability that they have to have had the hand of a guiding creator. And so I'm glad that a book is now out again and getting some notoriety. But there have been others that have recognized this.
Oh, yeah, and that's when science was pure, though. Now science is nothing but propaganda peddled by efforts to get grants and manipulate things, and we sadly see that. But these bold scientists are basically stating the facts, and I commend them. I mean, this guy's a Nobel laureate physicist. Robert Wilson wrote the foreword to the book, acknowledging the coherence of the argument that suggests a higher mind could be behind the universe's origins. Okay, the authors are promoting their book not as a religious or spiritual manifesto necessarily, but more as a, quote, critical examination of materialism, and they call for open debate about the origins and meaning of the universe. I'm just saying it's a pretty bold stance by them, and I would welcome those debates all across the country. They're Charlie Kirk-esque, they're Sam Bushman-esque, they're Dr. Bradley-esque. I mean, they're just great stuff. Next headline that highlights this same great news reality is this. I guess there's a YouGov study. It indicates a resurgence of religious interests among Generation Z, with young adults, particularly males, increasingly attending church. It's a huge, in my opinion, great article. They give these examples of these men that are saying, hey, we got to prioritize spiritual fulfillment. We're going to abstain from alcohol, drugs, and sex, and we're going to church. Now, believe it or not, according to 2023 data, a third of 18 to 24-year-olds believe in God or a higher power, a notable increase from 2021. For me, not near enough, but it's a good start. Anyway, there's influencers all speaking out for God. Hey, you can't answer these questions by the world alone, they say. You got to pray. You got to think of spiritual power. It's not worldly power. They're starting to acknowledge and focus on that. This shift contrasts sharply with older generational views, which said, hey, church is kind of negative. Not to this group. There's a resurgence in religious desire and liberty. Doctor?
Well, I'm happy to hear of a growing religiosity, if you will. We have fallen far from the original situation in this nation. Religion was at the center of everything. I mean, overarching, undergirding the whole founding of this nation was the hand of God, and the founding fathers recognized that very often. But since the advent of the humanists, which is a religious fervor, a faith-based belief system that has no God, that really came forward after the 1930s. I mean, it started back in the 1800s, but the whole basis of the humanistic approach to things is the doctrine of the American education system. It violates the First Amendment. It is an establishment of a religion, a faith-based belief system that has no divine role. So we have seen for generations now a falling off of religiosity, and it's nice to hear that there's
starting to be a resurgence, and I know it's not enough, but if we advocate for it, and if a lot of people work together, we can make it so. Final story of the hour: Joe Biden, age 82, has started radiation treatment, I guess, for an aggressive prostate cancer diagnosis. It was diagnosed back in May. Now, this is the disease that we thought he might have had, and they said, no, he didn't, and they lied, but now they're virtually admitting it. As of October the 11th, Biden's treatment plan includes radiation therapy and hormone treatment. The American Cancer Society notes that prostate cancer is the second most common cancer among men. It's usually not fatal. 1 in 44 men die from it. Anyway, they say Biden's cancer is hormone sensitive and responsive to treatment. And they say he'll turn 83 next month. Anyway, this is where I think we really need to show who we are. I'm saddened by suffering for Joe Biden. I'm saddened that he has cancer. I pray for Joe. I pray for his family. And I don't want any harm to come to anybody. I hope he can, deal with this properly. Now, on a political front, we don't agree on hardly anything. On a criminal front, I think he's guilty of some serious crime. That's my opinion, to which I'm entitled. However, he deserves due process of law as well. And I'm so sad that he's going through pain and his family is suffering. It's a tragic reality. We'll pray for Joe. Am I crazy, Scott? What do you think of that?
No, I think that you're taking, the approach that should be taken. You can love the sinner but hate the sin, I guess, so to speak.
That's right. And I can say I think Joe's a nutcase and I think he's a criminal. Nevertheless, I still don't want suffering for him or his family.
No, absolutely not. And again, though, I believe we've been lied to the whole time along it. And prostate cancer is generally, and this is not in every case, a kind of a slow degenerative kind of thing that ultimately could lead to death. But yet, generally, you die of old age before you die of that. But the fact is that I think they've been disingenuous at best when it comes to how they've handled everything they did with Joe and his health and his all the nonsense he was doing. But so I'm confident that he had prostate cancer for 4 years, his entire presidency, and I'm pretty sure they were aware of it with all the poking and prodding, everything everybody does. By the way, I heard that Trump just got his updated COVID shot. Did you hear that? I mean, what a bunch of Bravo Sierra.
But here's the question. The debate is, are they receiving placebos? And so
maybe
I don't really know, even know the truth. I know this. I ain't taking the jab. Didn't back then, won't now, and think everyone should not take it. I think RFK is spot on with his hesitancy and questioning of these vaccinations. Let's get to the truth, shall we? That's all I can say, Doctor.
Yeah, I mean, let's use our brains. God gave us intelligence for a reason, and we've got to quit just throwing it overboard for the experts' opinions.
Roger that. freedomsrisingsun.com. Sign up for your weekly webinar coupon. You can join and become part of the solutions today. You can also check out his collegiate series To Preserve the Nation, all at freedomsrisingsun.com. I'm Sam Bushman. We are syndicated by the Loving Liberty Networks. Spread the word, lovingliberty.net, and God save the Republic of the United States of America.